So what do Alex Ovechkin, Sam Walker, and Tom Cruise have in common? Let me get to that in a moment. But first of all, I want to welcome you from the Everline Resort and Spa here in Lake Tahoe. By the way, it happens to be owned by EO Hong Kong member Ivan Ting. And we're here with one of my fellow coaching partners, Bill Gallagher, leading one of our next CEO boot camps. It's something that maybe you might have a chance to join us. So let me come back to Alex. We saw over the last 2 weeks a couple of amazing sporting feats. Most immediately this Sunday at the Masters, finally Rory McIlroy got his green jacket. He was able to complete that Grand Slam. It's the first one in 25 years, the last being Tiger Woods. Tiger actually being able to piece together 3 of those. They now call that the Tiger Slam. And if you had a chance to watch that Sunday final, you saw almost this nightmare come back. It was 2011 that Rory had a 4-stroke lead, and he ends up blowing it, losing by 10 strokes. And that next 14 years of not being able to win that 4th major, the Masters, has haunted him. Well, let's speed forward. It's Sunday. He's got a 3-stroke lead, and again begins to start to blow it. He hits one right into the water, which is unheard of, and he gets down to the 18th hole, and all he has to do is make a really short putt to win it outright. And he misses it again, like he did the major last year. And so it goes into a playoff. Now, any one of us would have likely melted down, and that's what we were all afraid for Rory. But he's really been working on his mental toughness, as he expressed earlier when he was interviewed. And it reminds me of that famous Stoic quote, "Whatever happens, don't stumble over something behind you." Let me say it again, and it ties back to what we talked about last week in dealing and leading through chaos. Whatever happens, don't stumble over something that happened last week or even yesterday. So he was able to clear his mind. Beautiful drive. That iron shot gets it within 2 feet of the hole, knocks it in, and it was one of the most emotional moments I've seen recently in sport, except for last Sunday. And that's when we come back to Alex, the team captain of the Washington Capitals. And he beats a record that they thought would never get beaten, and that was Wayne Gretzky's scoring record in hockey. Yet he does it a week ago Sunday, and now he's invited to all of these television shows in order to celebrate this, including The Tonight Show. Yet, what does he do as the team captain? He turns those offers down. He skips what is really a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-career opportunity to celebrate something, again, nobody thought could ever be done before. Yet he said, look, as a team member, as the team captain, I'm tired. I owe it to the team. I need to rest because we've got to win the Stanley Cup. And that's really keeping your eye on the prize. So how does that then relate to Sam Walker? Well, Sam is a sports writer, and he wrote one of my favorite books of all time called The Captain Class. And what he did is he looked at the 2,000 sports teams that ever existed. And look, I'm going to get this tied back to why it's critical to us scale-ups. Anyway, he looks at the 2,000 teams that had ever existed, and he wanted to see what was the key to those teams that had been able to piece together a string of wins. You know, at the boot camp, we're going to be looking at constraints. What's in your way of scaling easier with less drama? How do we 10x the valuation? And we know one of the key constraints is success. It's once you've tasted it, start easy to start playing not to lose instead of playing to win. And so, again, it's difficult to piece together those successes. So Sam wanted to study this. And what he identified out of the 2,000 teams was 17. And those included my favorite team of all time, FC Barcelona, the soccer team. It was a women's volleyball team in Cuba. If you have any Cuban friends, ask them about this team. They won against the much taller Brazilians in the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. It's a women's field hockey team in Australia. It's, of course, the New England Patriots, and it's the winningest team in the history of all sport, the New Zealand All Blacks, who actually made the list twice. And what Sam wanted to figure out was what were the factors that allowed them to string together all of these wins? Was it the coach? Was it the budget? Was it the conditioning? Was it the strategy, the tactics? And what he found, surprisingly, is, yeah, all of those things need to be in place, but it wasn't the thing that made the difference. There was only one, and that was who was the team captain, what he ended up labeling a tier one team captain. And he particularly identified 7 characteristics. Now, where this ties back to us as scale-ups is as we're cleaning out the middle management organizations, the front line still needs led, and that's where you've got the role of the team captain. Remember, a team captain is not the manager or a senior leader. They're one of the team players. And if you get the right one, they can replace 7 managers. So let's take a look at these 7 criteria. What I'd like you to do is, as I go through them, you and maybe your senior team, I want you to see if you've got one or a handful of these employees, team members in the organization. If you do, fantastic. If not, I want you to focus on identifying and nurturing more of them. So what are some of those characteristics? First, they are first in and last out. They're first on the field, last off the field, first in the weight room, last out of the weight room. And what this does is counter what they call down in Australia the tall poppy syndrome. For those of you that were involved in the very beginning launch of your company, you might remember those early days where, man, everybody was in at 6:30 and stay until midnight. Yet, as you add people and scale the organization, there is a tendency to start moving towards the average. Nobody really wants to stand out unless you have the right team captain that's there, so respected by everybody else that they're the ones that set the pace. Number 2, they're willing to challenge senior leadership, and you so respect them that you're willing to listen. We saw that moment last year in the Super Bowl where Kelsey at halftime gets right in the coach's face, Andy Reid, to the point where he almost knocks him over and became this kind of media sensation. Yet at the end of the game, and I believe Andy, when he said this, he said, look, it's precisely what we and, I and the team needed to really kind of get us revved up to come back and win in that second half in terms of the Super Bowl. That's what a great team captain does. Number 3, willing to maybe kind of push the boundaries, break a few eggs along the way in order to get that success achieved. And they're unbelievably humble, and they're there knowing the players so well, their fellow teammates, that they know how to just, in many cases, non-verbally, just give them a look, give them a nudge, give them a pat on the back at the right moment they need in the game in order to get that project across the line. By the way, one of the really critical things is they're not going to ask any of the other teammates to do anything that they wouldn't do themselves. They need to model the way as Alex did by not going on that Tonight Show and instead resting for the rest of his team. And I think one of the most important is they've got unbelievable emotional intelligence, EQ. And that is that ability when everything is crashing down for them to remain calm, to kind of get everybody else settled down and get prepared to succeed. Now, what does that then have to do with Tom Cruise? And that's where I encourage you, and I've asked this audiences around the world, how many of you had a chance to watch Top Gun Maverick? And look, Tom is somebody who is really a first-class studier of his craft. He really cares about the details of the movies he's involved in. And look, I don't know this for a fact. I do know that his favorite scene was the beach scene, but I don't know for a fact that he read this book, The Captain Class, because first, if you remember in the movie, what was his rank? And that was a lowly captain, at least implied this kind of lowly captain. If you remember that scene, they're like, hey, your fellow Top Gun Iceman has become admiral. You're just captain. And Tom gave, without verbalizing, the look like a team captain would that, hey, it's captains that win wars, not admirals. If you remember in that scene, he's willing to, not ask any of the teammates to do anything that he wouldn't do. And so he breaks some eggs and steals an airplane and goes out and shows that this run can be done. And he's there to challenge the commander. That scene on the beach where the commander comes out like, hey, we've moved up the deadline. What are you doing out here playing? And as Tom famously said at the end of that scene, look, you wanted a team, there's your team. And ultimately, by ruining that almost $1 billion jet, he gets called in and they said, look, we ought to court-martial you, but instead of just being the trainer, we're going to make you the captain of this mission. Now, look, I know it's a movie, but here's what I'd love you to do. 3 things. First, cheer on my Washington Capitals. Let's see if Alex can lead the team to the next Stanley Cup. The second would be underneath his leadership. Number 2, come to join us in Denver, June 11th and 12th, where in our partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, we've got our next Scaling Up Summit. And one of many outstanding speakers is Sam Walker of the captain class. Look, I've had a chance to talk to him over the phone and get to know him, but I'm going to myself get to meet him in person and hear his stories and ask him the questions as he's been studying. How does this now apply to us mere mortal companies? And then number 3, gather your team together and go watch Top Gun Maverick after reading part 2 of the captain class. And I want you to identify where Tom Cruise has modeled out all 7 of what is a tier 1 team captain. Then go inside your own organization, identify a few or recruit those, and then keep scaling.